Hello, and welcome back to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast. Amanda Missey, Executive Director of the Bergen Volunteer Medical Initiative in New Jersey, will be sharing with us today about a variety of topics centered around leadership in the nonprofit sector.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast, where your host, KIRSTEN Bullock, interviews nonprofit CEOs and executive directors who share what's working. Show notes can be found at nonprofitleadersnetwork.com. Please add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. Now, let's get on with the show.
Thanks so much for joining me today.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Amanda and I met a couple of months ago at a Bloomerang conference in sunny Orlando, Florida. She shared a little bit about her background, including 25 plus years in the nonprofit sector, with a large portion of that being spent really focusing in on leadership training. So I thought you guys would like to hear from her. You can read her full bio at www.nonprofitleadersnetwork.com. Amanda, to kick us off, could you share with us a little bit about the background of the Bergen Volunteer Medical Initiative?
Sure, I'd love to tell you. So BVMI, we opened in November of 2009, so we're really just coming out of startup. It was started by a retired physician who got bored and found out that he really wanted to do something to help people locally, and he discovered a model called Volunteers in Medicine. So he was able to take something that had a proven track record and put it to work here in Bergen County. Just to tell you a little bit about Bergen County, it's in New Jersey. It's located just across the Hudson River from New York City. So it's a bedroom community essentially of New York City. Very wealthy areas, but also pockets of poverty, which people don't often see. They kind of close their eyes to it. So we provide free primary health care for people who work but don't earn very much money and don't have insurance. They have to live in Bergen County. So we're really taking care of the working poor, and we use volunteer physicians and nurse practitioners and nurses and other clinicians to provide that free health care.
Great, fabulous. And when we talked, you mentioned a lot about the leadership development initiatives that you've been a part of. And we've been talking a lot in the sector about leadership in the sector, how to develop more of that. What are your thoughts about the state of leadership today?
In the nonprofit sector, well, I'm a little worried, I guess. So I'm in my 50s. The people who I've worked with for the past 20 or 25 years, many of them are in their 60s and 70s, so they are beginning to retire. And you've read and I've read all about this leadership vacuum that's developing as people retire out of the sector. I am encouraged by the fact that people who are coming up in the nonprofit sector have gotten a lot more training than I ever had. I mean, I have an undergraduate degree in horticulture, which really did not prepare me for the nonprofit sector. I also have an MBA, but it was kind of an accidental thing that I got into nonprofits. I think that people who are coming into it now, young people and even people who are, in their 30s and 40s, it was maybe more intentional. But I do worry that as these positions at the top open up, that, the pay is not that great. You work really long hours. It's very satisfying, but it worries me that there may not be people in line who are willing to step in and not be paid what they're worth, and work a lot of really hard hours. So that worries me.
And I've been hearing that too. There was a research study that I read probably 3 or 4 years ago where they asked that question. And most of the younger people who were interviewed did not see themselves in their future stepping into that role because the pay is low, the hours are long. They want more life-work balance.
Exactly. And, I have to say that in my career, I actually stayed in the nonprofit sector because I had a work-life balance. I raised 2 children. I had a great boss who allowed me to have flexible hours. I worked very close to my house, so that's probably why I stayed at my last job as long as I did. But I'm not. I think that was kind of an anomaly. I don't know that every nonprofit organization is able or willing to do that. So I think I think that there may be some rude awakenings coming as people move out at the top, and we need to slot people in.
Mm-hmm. And another interesting thing that kind of falls into that that's been in the headlines lately, the law that's gone into effect for overtime.
Yes, that actually is going to be a huge challenge, because people who, again, if you're not making a lot of money, they bumped it up to $47,000 or $48,000.
Right.
It is going to cause a big problem for nonprofits.
Mm-hmm. Because up to this point, they've had most salaried positions are probably, at least locally, I know, even executive directors are in that 45,000 range.
Yes, they could be.
Yeah. And so for people who've been working 50 or 60 hours a week, for the boards to all of a sudden have to figure out how to come up with this extra money to pay for the operation of the organization.
That is going to be a very, very tough challenge, yes.
Yeah.
I think here in New Jersey, the salary levels are a little higher, so it's probably, I mean, I know executive directors who are not making much more than that, but it's going to certainly hit the mid-level, and absolutely the development associates and the people that you kind of count on to work weekends and, program directors. I think it's going to be a real hardship.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back to leadership in the sector. That was kind of a segue, but is there a leader in the sector that you admire for their leadership skills, and what is it about them that you most appreciate?
So I've been thinking about that. So there are a couple people that I really, really admire. There's a man here who started an organization in 1994. And he's built it into this really amazing organization that has a wide breadth of programs. It's about a $10 or $12 million organization, and it's universally admired. It has real impact. They have an AmeriCorps program there, so they do all these wonderful things. And I've thought ever since I found out about him that here's this real visionary, somebody who could see something 22 years ago that needed to be done and has built up this program. But I think what makes him a really good leader was he had the vision, and he also had the ability to operationalize. Because I have some other people that I admire a lot because they're global thinkers. They see the system, but they have problems then operationalizing what it is they're envisioning.
Mm-hmm. And that's rare to find both of those things in the same person.
It is. It is actually. I was looking at, I was poking around into, nonprofit leadership, and I came across an article that talks about a leadership profile. So the competencies are strategic thinker, relationship builder, collaborative decision maker, entrepreneurial achiever, effective communicator, change leader, and inspiring motivator. And this is all for, for not a good salary. So I'm not sure,
right.
That would be the ideal, but I don't know
like
where
Superwoman.
you get. Exactly. It is Superwoman. Yes. With a big S. Yes, definitely.
And we've had some great leaders up to this point, but like you said, with the low pay, high expectations, thinking through all of these different criteria and saying, that we should make sure people meet all of these.
It would be great if they could meet all of them, but I don't know. I don't know if that's reality or not. I guess right. Really good leaders know what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then they bring people onto the team that complement those. Right, absolutely.
And do you see any good nonprofit leadership development programs that exist right now? Are there things that we can point people to as here's some places where you can go and get developed?
Well, so I'm a little biased here. At my prior job, I had the great good fortune to start a leadership program called Bergen Leads, and it came out of my experience in a statewide leadership program, and these are civic leadership programs that often are actually run by chambers, and they're all over the country. And what Lead New Jersey and Bergen Leads did was they took people from really disparate backgrounds. So there was an intentional effort to bring people in from not only the nonprofit sector, but from the business community, community volunteers, the education community. So it wasn't just focused on nonprofits, but there was leadership development. We happen to use the DISC assessment, which is it's like a Myers-Briggs. There's a bunch of different things, StrengthsFinder, which help people kind of zero in on certainly their communication skills, but also what their leadership style was, so they'd have a better understanding of themselves. But then we did a lot of work about, so if you're a high D and a high I, and somebody who's a high S and a high C is driving you crazy, like, how do you deal with that person? So it was really, you kind of got a much better understanding of maybe why other people do what they do, and how to, the whole thing was about being effective working with other people. So that was terrific. And I think the other thing was, I think that because it was such a mishmash of people's, from different backgrounds, that I got a much better understanding of the business community and how they think. And we spent a whole day looking at nonprofits. So they had a much better understanding of what the challenges are, why are nonprofits, why are they mission driven, all that. So my advice would be to tell people to go look for these community leadership programs. There are some that are independent, but many, many of them are run by chambers of commerce.
That's great advice.
It's a great experience, yeah. And then you're part of an alumni organization. Lead New Jersey has over 1,000. There's 200 in Bergen Leads. So you become part of this network, which I'm big on networks because I kind of collect people and figure the more people I know, the more opportunities there are out there to, make key connections and put partnerships together and work with people. So it was a great experience.
Great. And I've been through two similar programs, one in Orlando, one in Southern Indiana. And they're fun. And then, like you said, building a network and being able to connect with people who can help make the organization stronger.
Exactly.
Do you have any specific examples of how you've leveraged your networks, maybe partnerships that have developed out of that?
Part of just building the Bergen Leads program was all about leveraging networks, and it's kind of like ripples in a pond. You throw in a rock and then they just keep getting bigger and bigger. We actually tracked kind of the network evolution and to see how many different places we were able to plug into from that beginning group of people. There were a lot of so for instance, Meals on Wheels, one of our local Meals on Wheels connected with the Brief Babe. She does like adult absorbent products. And then they connected with Visiting Homemakers, and this was all through Bergen Leads. So they were able to create partnerships with organizations that they may never have met otherwise or not even known existed. And they were able to strengthen their own internal programs and also help those other programs grow too. So that would be an example.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that was a nonprofit partnering with a for-profit.
There were a number of different partnerships that sprung up. Yes.
Okay. And it's great when those go cross-sector like that. And often it's a win-win, I'm sure you found, for both the business and the nonprofit.
Yes. Well, I spent part of my career too doing corporate engagement programs. So, and that was always the great outcome was that you'd help a nonprofit develop a partnership with a corporation, and you kind of just never knew where it was going to go.
Right. And it's always fun to embark on one of those journeys, I think.
It is, yes, as long as they turn out well, it's great.
Right. Well, it seems that we all probably have a story about a time when we could have been a better leader or made better decisions. Is there a time you can think of when something maybe didn't go quite as you'd planned?
Well, so there's plenty of times when things haven't gone quite as I planned. I think that the one thing that I would do differently than what I did in the past was I stayed in the same organization for 18 years, and I'm not sure I would have done that. If I think I left there, and coming to a new position with more responsibility. I have to raise all the money. There's a lot more that I have to do here, but it's been really energizing and invigorating to be in a new place. So I would not have stayed someplace 18 years.
And is there a particular instance or something that happened that helped you come to that conclusion?
There was a leadership change at my old organization, or a pending leadership change. So this actually kind of speaks to things like succession planning and, it speaks to succession planning. My boss had been there for 20 years. She was getting to retirement age. We all knew she was going to retire sometime. And the succession planning process was very bumpy, and I just kind of I had another opportunity because of Bergen Leads come knocking at my door, and it just seemed like it was the right time to make the jump. And probably better for my old organization, too, because I'm not sure, I'd been there for 18 years. So to have, and I was like second in command, so to have somebody who had been in a leadership position at the organization for 18 years to stay on and become the new leader, I'm not sure that would have been good for the organization either.
Mm-hmm. And you say that the succession planning process was a little bumpy. Based on what you saw, are there things that you would recommend for other organizations to make sure to do when they're entering in a process like that?
I think that, first of all, people just have to think about it. That's because, the worst thing to have happen is, and this keeps me up at night with some of my key people in here, is to wake up one morning and say, oh, blah, 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 isn't coming back to work. So-and-so got hit by, that's a little extreme, got hit by a bus. But, you have to think about, if there are key people in the organization, you have to think about it way before you ever need to replace them. So that would be one thing. Another thing would be to bring in an outside person who has experience and who also understands your organization. Because there's succession planning and there's succession planning. And I think that without a good understanding of the culture of the organization, that you aren't going to be well served by somebody who doesn't understand that. But I think you need an outside person. And there's tons of books, and, you can read up on how to do it, but I think having somebody who is an outside observer, I guess, guiding you through the process is probably a plus.
And having somebody who's perhaps a little more impartial.
Yes, and objective. Yeah. Yes. Yep. But I think they still need to have an understanding of the organization and its culture.
Right. And do you think an understanding of the nonprofit culture is enough, or do you think an understanding of that particular culture of the organization is best?
So certainly of the nonprofit culture, because I've found that a lot of times, we've had, in my years, we've had corporate people who come in to consult maybe on a pro bono basis and don't really understand the nonprofit culture. So I think that is important because, there are some similarities, but there's so many differences. I think maybe an understanding of the sector, and at least an appreciation for the culture of the individual organization.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's very helpful. So with all of your background experience, what do you see as the single most important trait for a nonprofit leader?
Wow, I have to narrow it down to one, huh?
Or two.
I think probably a willingness and being open to new ideas and new ways of doing things, and flexibility. Because it's kind of a dance. We have a saying here, if it wasn't for the people, like every day I walk in and I kind of don't know what my day is going to look like. So, you just have to be able to go with the flow.
Mm-hmm. So in dancing, the similarities being listening to the music, being able to adjust as needed.
Yes.
Okay, nice. So any closing words to share that might help provide inspiration or encouragement to other leaders of nonprofits who are trying to figure out the right next step to take?
It's a great, I've loved my career. I'm one of the few people that in my, circle of friends who has been pretty consistently happy with my job. So it's a great thing to get into. You feel pretty good about what you're doing normally. But so money isn't everything, I guess. I would encourage people to go into the nonprofit sector. I would also encourage them to, keep nudging for better salaries. Like there needs to be some parity between nonprofits and the for-profit sector.
Any recommendations on things that we can do to work towards that in the sector?
Well, I think personally that nonprofits consistently undervalue themselves. I even have done it. So I think we need to get a more accurate. We need to be able to internalize this value. We need to see ourselves as what we're really worth. Mm-hmm. It's because, yes, we're doing good, but if we weren't here, then there would be a lot more things wrong with the world. So what we're doing brings value to the community, and we need to value it accordingly.
Absolutely. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts and wisdom with us. And thank you to all of our listeners for everything you do to make the world a better place.
Thanks for listening to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast with KIRSTEN BULLOCK. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll check out our prior episodes and that you'll pass along our web address, nonprofitleadersnetwork.com, to your friends and colleagues in the nonprofit sector.